Saludos, it's your host, Gabe Morales. When people think of gangs, they usually don't think about places like Wyoming. The state is mostly located in a heavily mountain region of the western United States, flat prairie land, and it is sparsely populated. It has large open wilderness areas like Yellowstone, Grand Tetons, and Bighorn National Parks, where you might even catch an old bear scratching their back on a big pine tree. But outlaws have roamed Wyoming since the Wild Wild West days with guys such as Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, whom I plan to cover in a future episode, along with other Old West gunslingers. Rebels against society continue to flock to the state like when the Hells Angels do their Cody, Wyoming run, and many pass through the state on even bigger runs, such as to nearby Sturgis, South Dakota, when as many as 500,000 people descend upon that tiny town to enjoy motorcycles, including outlaw motorcycle gangs. Cheyenne is the capital and the most populous city in Wyoming, with a population of almost 100,000 people. In 2008, police documented 186 gang members living within the city limits, with an additional 39 associates from as many as 18 different gangs. While that may not sound like a lot, I think a lot of them are probably undercounted. And as I stated, a lot of people pass through there who are gang members, although they may not be permanent residents. In 2008, my friend Chris Grant and I traveled to Wyoming to teach about gangs to employees of Wyoming DOC who worked at the state pen located in Rawlings. Chris picked me up at the Cheyenne airport. Although I thought maybe there were a few gangsters there, I didn't see any, in spite of being told that Serenios were active there. During the drive up to the prison located in the middle of the state, while looking out the passenger side window, it just seemed to reaffirm my stereotype that there were more cattle than people living there. And I fell asleep for a good part of the ride after getting tired of counting sheep. Chris woke me up and told me we're almost there when I woke up to see this sign. Chris covered Native American gangs and I covered Hispanic gangs. The police and corrections attendees enjoyed our presentation, and I was told while gang activity there is not as big as in other states, they did have a presence in Wyoming. In 2017, 2 local men were put behind bars in connection with the stabbing in downtown Cheyenne. The Laramie County Sheriff's Office said that 26-year-old Isaac Garcia and 25-year-old Joseph Sena were arrested after a short standoff. Both men were suspected of being SOAR 13 gang members. In 2017, police began investigating the death of a man in Rawlings who was shot at close range with a sawed-off shotgun. The victim, in this case, was shot in the chest. The body was left on the side of the road and was covered with shirts. Later, one of the suspects admitted during Miranda warnings to covering up the victim with shirts and changing his clothes before arriving in Utah. Authorities from the Wyoming Department of Criminal Investigation were able to track Jose Ramos and another juvenile to Utah, where, with the assistance of the Salt Lake County Metro Gang Unit, they found the two near Utah Lake. Jose Ramos was arrested for the crime, which occurred in Wyoming, while he was on his way to California. Once authorities arrested the two in Utah, they were extradited back to Wyoming to stand trial. In the city of Cheyenne, Wyoming, there are Lincoln Park, 13 Sureños, Southside from the southern part of the city, and Southside criminals. These Southside gangs may fight Norteños that come up from Greeley, Colorado, but Sureños far outnumber them on the street and in corrections facilities. Sureños are active in the Wyoming State Penitentiary in Rawlings and make up approximately 40% of all validated security threat group inmates, while Norteños only make up 2%. Many Wyoming inmates were moved to the Only Springs prison in Crowley, Colorado in early 2002 to 2003. This was a private facility, and it was a time when Wyoming authorities really started to notice the increase in gang activity. It was found that Wyoming inmates formed a security threat group known as the 307, which stood for the Wyoming Area Code, and they quickly gained notoriety due to their assaultive behaviors. It was said that the group formed as a means of protection against Colorado inmates who were stealing their canteen and extorting them. As Wyoming inmates traveled to various states in previous years, they found that they were stronger if they stuck together. And due to overcrowding in Wyoming, the 307 group eventually banded together as a clique. The Crowley facility housed inmates from Wyoming, Washington, and Colorado, and it is my understanding that there was a 3-tier commissary system and other privileges based on the state of origin. This was a recipe for disaster. As I stated, Wyoming inmates banded together as 307, and the Washington State inmates banded together as Washington Riders, and Colorado inmates banded together in their respective group. As individuals from these cliques got into it with each other and the administration, tensions came to a head, and there was a major disturbance at the Crowley facility. One of the investigators into that incident is a good friend of mine. Most out-of-state inmates from Wyoming are now back in the Wyoming system. So 307 is basically a non-issue today. Authorities continue to keep an eye out on gang activity within the state. Utah has a population of about 3.3 million, approximately 80% who live around the Salt Lake City area, leaving vast expanses of the state nearly uninhabited. The Salt Lake City area does have a sizable gang problem, and I've communicated over the years with a great organization, the Utah Gang Investigators Association, about issues there. This is my understanding of Hispanic gangs within the state. There are approximately 5,000 gang members in the greater Salt Lake Valley, including over 3 dozen Hispanic gangs. There are quite a few Sureño cliques, including Chiques, The Avenues, 18th Street, Florencia, White Fence, Barrio Nueva Estrada, as well as local gangs such as Ogden 13, Barrio Loco Town, and others. Florencia 13, as I stated, is active in the state, and several members of the gang were involved in a local mall shooting in 2019 with rival norteños. 2 members were sent to prison as a result of that shooting, and they were tied to several other shootings for which they were incarcerated. There are also norteño cliques in Utah, such as Rose Park, Familia Barrio Loco, Familia Por Siempre, V1, which is a conglomeration of different barrios such as 6th Street Norte, Brown Society Gang, Tiny Locals, Diamond Street, Mafiosos, and 21st Street Norte, all located in Utah. The California gang influence on Utah's local Hispanic gangs was clearly identified as early as the late 1970s. During that time, there was a Job Corps program where youth could get weekend passes to Salt Lake City, where they would hang out and party. During their visits, they often got into trouble, which prompted the Salt Lake City Police Department to start overtime shifts to deal solely with them. If a Job Corps member would get into trouble, Salt Lake City Police Department officers would take them back to the drop-off center, and they would get transported back to the Clearfield Job Corps Center. Some of the earliest groups with ties to the Job Corps claimed to be a dance group called West Coast Pop Lockers. They later admitted to being members of the West Coast Crips, and it was discovered they were recruiting kids on weekend visits to Salt Lake. Westside Homeboys and Westside Vatos then started on Salt Lake's west side. These gangs were homegrown and made up of neighborhood friends and family. Los Barrio Locos evolved into Barrio Loco Town and was more of a Glendale gang that started in the late 1970s to early 80s by members of the Montoya family. Eastside Tokers, or Tunerville Tokers, started off in the Eastside area by members who came up from California. Barrio Chosen Few and United Few are another homegrown Hispanic gang, along with VGL, who were started by the Vigil family from Salt Lake City. Los Pachucos Unidos was initially a group of high school jocks who were influenced by the lowrider culture. The group later broke off into a couple of gangs, such as Salt Lake Posse and Diamond Street. Original members of the Los Pachucos Unidos still associate and they get together today, even though they have families and are no longer active within the gang culture. Some gangs started by teenagers were influenced by a 1979 movie, Boulevard Nights, which portrayed Southern California's Hispanic gang culture. Since that time, Hispanic gang culture in Utah has continued to grow, and Southern California still serves as the primary influence, although California has influence on local norteños. There were some Hispanic groups that were modeled after California style, but don't claim Sureños or norteños. Many of these groups claim the color brown, and frequently are referred to as brown pride gangs, such as Cubo Locotes, Eastside Rascals, La Raza, which are all found in the greater Salt Lake area. Cubo does align with Sureños now, especially in the prison system. Both the Mexican Mafia and West Familia prison gangs have sent out representatives from California several times and had contact with validated gang members from Utah DOC prisons. The Nuestra Familia federal faction has made direct efforts to organize and restructure norteños out on the street. La M has heavy influence in prison, but not as much on the streets, at least for now. The area has also seen an increase in members from Mexico's large drug trafficking organizations, including the Sinaloa Cartel, Juarez Cartel, and I have heard Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación. It appears as much as 70 to 80% of the area's street-level narcotics have been transported via Mexico, which gives many of the local street gangs an income in the underground economy. These gang members involved in the distribution of cocaine, Mexican black tar heroin, marijuana, methamphetamine, and more recently, fentanyl pills. Authorities and police gang units and organizations such as the Utah Gang Investigators Association continue to keep an eye on Utah's gang situation. Nearly 3/4 of Nevada's people live in Clark County, which contains the Las Vegas metropolitan area where the state's 3 largest incorporated cities are located. Nevada's capital is Carson City, and Reno lies close by. There is gang activity in the northern part of the state also. Nevada is largely desert and semi-arid, especially in the Great Basin, which is located between Reno and Las Vegas. Nevada is known for its libertarian laws. The establishment of legalized gambling and lenient marriage and divorce proceedings in the 20th century transformed Nevada into a major tourist destination. The Italian mafia had a major presence in the city, and today there's even a mob museum located in downtown Las Vegas. I highly recommend it. Nevada is the only state where prostitution is legal, although it is illegal in Clark County and Washoe County, which contain Las Vegas and Reno. Today, tourism remains Nevada's largest employer. And as a tourist, I have gone there many times and talked to many cop friends and visited friends I grew up with who retired there. I have a good friend that I met at the King County Jail named Mike Bergen, who worked in the Nevada system before he was employed with King County. And he was also friends with the veteran of the Nevada DOC system named Bill Valentine.
I had a sergeant that I worked side by side with. His name was Bill Valentine. The guy was amazing. He knew gang activity. He could spot it. He knew what to look for. I learned a lot from him. And I was able to obtain that and took it with me to Washington.
Right. Well, that was kind of, I was going to say it's kind of a rhetorical question because I know a lot of times you would give me a heads up. Hey, Gabe, you might want to make sure when you classify this guy, look out for gang affiliation because you had spotted, him just covered in ink.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell us, how did you meet Bill Valentine and what was your experience in, working with him? Can you tell us a little bit more about Bill?
Sure. Bill worked at the Nevada State Prison. He was a sergeant there when I hired on. And he was pretty much in, running knew the gang activity. And so he was our go-to guy for any kind of questions we had. I learned quite a bit from him. He was like an walking encyclopedia of gang information. And he would show me what to look for, the kind of activities they would do on the yards, how they would react for different situations. Some of the OGs would literally cause a little bit of problem, like in usually October, November, so they could get rolled up for the winter, so they didn't have to walk down the main line to the chow hall, so they can get fed in their rooms. They would do that. But some of these guys, they would. I've had inmates tell me, "Hey, boss, don't come to work tomorrow. There's going to be a stabbing." And of course, I immediately reported that information, and they knew I would report it. And I'll tell you, respect is the big thing in there. Right. You want to make it through the day. You just don't disrespect them. You're still in control of what's going on. But I'll tell you, the gang activity, these guys, they would, you could tell a hot summer day, and Bill Valentine told me, just keep an eye on them. If they're going out to the yard on a 90-degree day and they've got their winter coats on that look like they're packing, Well, they are. They're packing with paperback books. They cut the linings of the coats, stuff them with these paperbacks, and there's going to be a shanking. And that's just how they did it. And another telltale.
They made their own body armor then.
They really did, yeah. And it was effective. I mean, it was effective even from us shooting at them with the bird shot, because it wouldn't penetrate those books. They knew what to do and how to do it. And I'll tell you, I mean, we didn't just arbitrarily shoot people, but you know what I'm saying, for any kind of fighting and stuff like that, or in this case, you know, when there's a shanking going on or something. But another telltale sign Bill told me to watch out for was huge purchases of canteen or store. Mm-hmm. They would buy a lot of food because they knew there was going to be a lockdown after there was a fight or any kind of riot. And sure enough, boy, he was right on the money for that. But he would show me and explain to me about tattoos, and a lot of them they write on the walls of their cells, and that's kind of how they tag their own area. Mm-hmm. So, and tagging is just basically putting their mark on the wall or mark on that area. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was interesting.
Well, as you know, I got to know Bill too. I was introduced to him through you, and we struck up quite a few conversations and communications, and I helped him out with his book. He helped me out with mine. I think a lot of people were envious or angry or both about Bill talking about these secretive gangs, which to that point had very little exposure other than a few newspaper articles and a few TV special reports. Many of these people badmouthed Bill and also badmouthed me later when I wrote my books on prison gangs. Yet I would see them sometimes in their presentations using pictures and information of mine and Bill's materials and photos. So go figure. Haters will be haters. I first became familiar with Nevada gangs via Bill. We were having some problems in Washington State with members of a prison gang called the Aryan Family. And some of these members were housed at the King County Jail where I worked. Bill previously dealt with a notorious inmate who was a major problem when he was housed in Nevada named Richard Carmichael, who knew members of the Aryan Warriors prison gang, a group that was founded within the Nevada DOC. Carmichael was the founder of the Aryan Family, a gang that is still very active in Washington State, although Carmichael is no longer considered one of its leaders. As I covered in the AAF portion of my Northwest Aryan Gangs video, part 1. According to Valentine, the prison gang known as Mi Raza Unida, or My United Race, was formed in the Nevada prison system by Ernesto Neto Mercado in 1984. At first glance, the Mi Raza Unida appeared to be Sureños, but they were their own entity. The MRU were no different than other prison gangs in that they included intimidation and assaults on other prisoners. During this time, MRU would approach any new arrivals, even including Sureños from Southern California, and especially Paisas, Mexican nationals, and gave them an option to either join the MRU or get assaulted and fend for themselves. This was the reason that at one time MRU were the top dogs on the yard within the Nevada Department of Corrections, as far as Hispanic prisoners were concerned. In later years, the tables turned on the MRU due to the growing numbers of Sureños and Paisas within the Nevada Department of Corrections. There are now over 1,000 validated Sureños and over 500 validated Paisas, while there were less than 50 MRU members. So the gang today is basically obsolete. The MRU also got in trouble with the Mexican Mafia. Their symbol, a Mexican eagle with the letters MRU, very closely resembled tattoos used by the Mexican Mafia, which is another reason why Sureños don't like them. Another person that I've worked with in Nevada is Maus Russell Coconut Funoi Moana, who is extremely knowledgeable about Nevada DOC gangs, and we've attended meetings together when the National Major Gang Task Force was active. I was part of 18th Street workshops in Reno, Nevada for the International Latino Gang Investigators Association, and I have many good memories of that event and individuals that I'm still friends with to this day. Another person I worked with when I was with ILJA was Antonio Rodriguez, and we put together some great Las Vegas trainings with the assistance of his partner, Chavito, both of whom worked at the Clark County Jail. And we're also involved in the National Latino Peace Officers Association, a different group that sometimes people get confused with, that I work with in Seattle and have also presented for in Las Vegas on security threat groups. This is my understanding of another Hispanic prison gang in Nevada after talking to Bill Valentine, Coconut, and others working within the state. The Nevada 13 prison gang originated around the year 2000 by inmates who were opposed to the Sureño invasion of the state and Mexican mafia associates trying to boss them around. Several of the founders were previously MRU members. Other recruits were members of local cliques that were being victimized by Sureños on the streets. Nevada 13 colors are black, and they have at times aligned with Norteños against California Sureños, and have also been part of the Northtown Family Alliance with Las Vegas black gangs. They may sometimes tattoo 030 for the last three numbers of a Las Vegas zip code, 89030. There are lots of street gangs that operate in Las Vegas that I have not covered here, but perhaps I'll revisit them in more in depth later. There are also biker gangs that sometimes beef in Reno, Las Vegas, and other places like Laughlin. I will likely do future videos on some of those groups as well, and incidents that happened within the state of Nevada. This is my last video in my series on Southwest gangs. Much of the info contained in this video can also be found in a book that my carnal Steve Lucero and I wrote called From Canalismo to Chaos, Chicano Gangs and History of the Southwest U.S. Steve is featured in a previous episode covering Colorado gangs, so you don't want to miss that if you haven't seen it yet. I hope that you learned a thing or two in this short video about Wyoming, Utah, and Nevada gangs. As always, I welcome your respectful comments. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.